Hello, everybody, and welcome to our well-being webisode, Building Resilience, Coping with Stressors. My name is Janelle Soika. I'm a health services specialist at Geisinger, and with me today is Erica Marvin. Erica is a licensed social worker from the Center for Well-Being here at Geisinger, and today we are going to discuss stress and positive strategies to navigate life's challenges with resilience. Just a disclaimer, this information is being provided to increase your awareness. It is not intended to be medical advice. If you believe that you may have any medical conditions or have specific questions regarding your health, please see your physician. Welcome, Erica, and thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you so much for having me today.
You're welcome. So we do have a lot on our agenda today, and I am thrilled to get us started. Um, so I think first, let's explore what resilience means. And then after that, we can dive into ways to build resilience through effective stress management techniques. So Erica, can you talk about what resilience is and why is it so important for our health and our well-being?
Sure. So, resilience is our ability to bounce back from stress, trauma, some of the challenges that we might come up against in life. So, it's about how well we adapt in the face of really difficult circumstances in life. So, resilience supports both our mental and physical well being, helping us lead healthier, more balanced lives, even during hard times. So that's why it's really great when we can be resilient.
Yeah, for sure. Resilience is often seen as a natural quality that we're born with. Is that something that we can practice and improve upon?
Yeah, it sure is. So, resilience is a skill you can practice and it strengthens over time. It's not something that you're just simply born with or without, which is a good thing, right? So, if you don't think that you're that particularly resilient, there are things that you can do to improve and build on that. So, things like practicing optimism and gratitude and really like learning healthy ways to cope is a really big thing when you are trying to be a resilient person.
Yeah, that is great. I think from my understanding, resilience is so crucial. And I think it's a foundation for how we effectively navigate life's challenges. Today, I also want to explore strategies that help strengthen our resilience, enable us to cope better with adversity, and thrive in the face of stress. Stress can vary in intensity and often become very overwhelming due to various triggers in our lives. And sometimes the word stress carries a negative connotation. Can you explain to us what stress is and is all stress bad?
Yeah, so stress is our body's natural response to something that's challenging or demanding. And you can look at it as, we can become stressed from something that is actually happening, where there's something in our environment truly creating it. Or we could even create stress with the thought of something bad that's going to happen. So it doesn't even have to be something that's currently going on. So what's happening when we become stressed is that our body releases adrenaline and cortisol. And that's sort of helping us prepare for, you've probably heard of this fight or flight response. So that's kind of what's happening in our bodies. So we have a very physiological response to stress, and some of us that might look like our heart is racing and we get sweaty, and it's just different for everybody. But there is this idea of positive stress. So positive stress is more like short-term stress. It's not like this chronic stress, and so it could be be like a performance pressure when we have to perform for something, could be a positive stress, because it helps motivate us and focus us. So those are those things that, if, for instance, maybe you're not a good public speaker, right? So you could be stressed in preparing to do a speech. But that stress isn't going to stay with you because you're going to do the speech and the stress will be done. So that would be like a form of a positive stress.
Nice. I love
Yeah.
it. So it's not always easy to know when you're stressed out. And we know stress can manifest in various, subtle ways. Recognizing the early signs can definitely be a key in managing stress before it becomes overwhelming. What would you say are some common signs of stress that we should be aware of?
Yeah, so there's a lot of signs of stress. So we have some physical components of stress, things like headaches and muscle fatigue and sleep issues, and you can even get maybe some GI issues. There are emotional factors to stress, which could be things like anxiety or irritability or maybe some depression. We also have cognitive things that can happen to us when we're feeling a lot of stress, like we could have difficulty concentrating, we can be forgetful. And then some behavioral things could be like changes in our appetite or withdrawing from others, really kind of isolating ourselves. Procrastinating could be another one. So those are all just signs that, hey, maybe we're not doing so well in managing our stress.
Absolutely. And I think it's definitely interesting to understand like the wide range that effects of stress, whether short term or long term. And it is clear that managing stress is fundamental for maintaining overall health and well being. It seems like there's no one size fits all. Each person may need different strategies to effectively manage their stress. What stress management strategies could you share with us?
Yeah. So I do think we have to be really intentional about this, because it takes effort, right? So we're not going to manage our stress by doing nothing. And sometimes this is what we tend to do is think I'm just not going to do it. But what happens is the stress builds upon the stress builds upon, right? Like it just keeps building if we're not managing it. So some of the things that we could do are relaxation techniques. This is probably one of those common things that a lot of people have heard: the deep breathing, the meditation, the mindfulness practice. But if that's something that's not really up your alley, or you don't think you can really do that, you can do things like staying active, exercising, going on walks, just being active. Even if you feel like you don't want to be, that's probably the time that you should be. Sleep is a really big thing when we're looking at mental health in general. But for stress management, you want to make sure you're getting enough sleep, and you want to try to make that quality sleep, right? So you could sleep, 7 hours, but if you're waking up 5 times while you're sleeping, not very good quality sleep. So we want to try to really focus on getting a really good night's sleep. Staying connected to others is a good stress management strategy. Sometimes when we're feeling stress, we want to disconnect, right? It's kind of the natural feeling of I don't want to deal with anything else, but you want to try to stay connected to people, and do things that you enjoy. Do some activities that bring you joy, whether that's, if you play an instrument or you like music, going to a concert maybe, or just putting in your favorite song, getting involved in maybe hobbies that you're interested in, things like that.
Great. Yeah, those all sound like really helpful strategies that we can all try and definitely tools that we can have in our tool belt to use. I love the being active one. I feel like that one definitely resonates for me. So I
Mhm.
love it. Understanding the signs and stress and recognizing its impact on your body seems essential. Discussing these effects is important because without effective resilience and stress management strategies, I can imagine it could lead to some significant long term health issues. Are there any long term health effects that you have noticed that might be linked to chronic stress?
Yeah, yes, definitely. So, um, chronic stress can take a really serious toll on our physical and mental health. And so I think, and thank goodness for this, but really back when I was studying psychology and a young social worker 25 years ago, we didn't really understand as much the link to stress and our health. And now we do. And so it's very clear that stress can really, really wreak havoc in our lives, physically and mentally. So it can lead to cardiac issues, a weakened immune system, mental health struggles, GI issues, sleep disorders, memory and concentration problems, could even lead to reproductive and hormonal issues, and also chronic pain. So there's a lot of things that if we're not managing our stress and it builds upon time, we could really be in a lot of trouble with our health if we're not managing our stress.
Yeah, for sure. That definitely makes sense. And then another thing I often hear about is maintaining that work-life balance, that's crucial for resilience and also managing your work-related stress. Achieving that is, easier said than done. The world's constantly going on 24/7. It doesn't stop, when we clock out of work. We can have responsibilities that follow us home. Working late can make it challenging to maintain that balance. How can you balance self-care and some of those other responsibilities?
Yeah, so balancing self-care with your responsibilities is obviously can be very challenging. So some helpful things that you might be able to try are to like schedule self-care like an appointment, right? So sometimes if we have it on our calendar, now it becomes where it's not optional. And so if we make self-care not optional, maybe we'll actually do it. So schedule that, try to schedule that in on your like it's an appointment. Also setting boundaries to protect your well-being is a really important piece of this. So if it is trying to find balance between work and home life, is there a way that you could set boundaries around that? So maybe it's turning, I don't need to know my tiger text at night, so I'm going to turn that off so I'm not being alerted for things that I don't need to, and then I think I got to jump in and look at it. Or maybe it's, I don't need to review my emails at home. I do it more out of habit. Maybe I'm going to just put my phone somewhere where I'm not feeling the need to keep looking at the emails. Trying to come up with some tactics where you could really set boundaries around your self-care. Another important thing you could do is ask for help or delegate. A lot of us don't want to do that, right? We have a really hard time asking for help, but it's a crucial part of when you're trying to find balance in your life. So maybe there are things that somebody else could be handling, whether that's at work or at home, that you just don't ask them to do because you kind of feel like you need to do all the stuff all the time. And so asking for help is really important. And also, checklists and planners can be really helpful tools as well to kind of keep us organized and manage our time.
Great. Yeah, those all sound like wonderful ways to maintain that balance for sure. So we do know, stress manifests differently for each of us, and we all get to face those stressful situations and unexpected or unpleasant events from time to time. During these challenges or periods of uncertainty, it can definitely be tough to stay optimistic, especially when everything feels like it is just falling apart. Our thoughts seem like that can influence how we respond to different situations. So, how can we maintain or foster positive thoughts or outlooks during those challenging times?
Yeah, so fostering those positive thoughts during times that are really difficult for us, it doesn't mean that we're ignoring the difficulties or we're uh, like the difficulties are going to be there, but it just means we're going to try to shift our focus a little bit on more things that feel a little bit more hopeful. So we can do that through something as simple as practicing gratitude, which it could look like when you sit down for dinner at night, having an exercise where maybe you say something that you're grateful for that day. And when you do that every day and it becomes a practice, it actually helps us kind of shift our mindset to more positive instead of negative thoughts. And we also, as human beings, we're kind of more prone to have negative thoughts more so than positive. So, like, our self talk in our minds tends to be a little bit more negative than positive. So, we want to be aware of that. And when we catch ourselves doing that, we want to try to reframe it in our minds with something positive. So, we can use positive affirmations during those times to fight back with those negative thoughts that we might have. And we could say things like, this will pass, or I am capable, or you're doing great, just really positive affirmations in those moments. You want to focus on the things you can control. Okay, so a lot of us spend time worrying about things that are completely out of our control, things that we may not ever be able to do anything about. So we want to try to really zero in on what are the things I can control. And then another thing that we could do is stay grounded in the present moment. Okay, rather than worrying about the future, I'm like a type of person that I'm thinking like 5 steps ahead, right? And so people who tend to do that we tend to be the worriers, right? Because we're thinking like a year into the future and we don't need to be. And we're coming up with a story and a narrative that might never happen, but we've just spent our time worrying about that. So we want to try to really stay grounded and be present and not worry about the future.
Yeah, great. So I think it sounds like we're challenging everyone to say something positive at dinner tonight, right?
Yes. Yeah. Or however gratitude looks for you.
Yes. Yep. And another thing is, supporting others during stressful times, is definitely something that's crucial for their well-being. We want to understand how to offer support so that we can help alleviate some of the burden that, these folks might be carrying. How do you think we could be a place of support for those who are struggling?
Yeah. So we could be supportive to people by listening without judgment is like a key to this. We want to be really good active listeners. I talk about this a lot with other things that I'm doing in social work presentations and when I'm talking to people. That a lot of times what we do is when somebody's talking, we're already thinking about how we're going to respond. Right? We're already coming up with an idea of how we're going to respond to what they're saying. So a key important piece of like helping somebody is sitting in the moment with them and just actively listening to them talk about what they're going through and then thinking of a thoughtful response afterwards. So we want to listen without judgment. We want to actively listen. We want to show empathy and compassion. Obviously, if someone's coming to us or we're noticing that we're struggling, we want to be as empathetic as we can be. We want to be compassionate. So, really being kind, consistent, and your presence is actually more important than anything for people who are struggling. Right. So sometimes we think that we've got to have like the magical thing to say to somebody who's struggling. But, and I don't know if you've struggled in your life. I think most of us have. Sometimes it's just having that, knowing that that person is there is enough. So their presence is enough sometimes. You don't have to always have like the right thing to say.
Yeah, that sounds great. And, I think sometimes, we might get to a point where, stress just might be too much, for us to manage on our own. And, especially if there's nobody around that we can have listen to us. And I think, at that point, everyone does need some help from, time to time. So how can someone seek professional help if they are feeling, overwhelmed during those situations?
Yeah, so seeking help is a really great, healthy step, right? So it's not, some people might see it as a weakness and they may feel very vulnerable when they're seeking help or when they think they might need help, but it's actually takes a lot of courage and you're really strong for doing it. So the way that you could do it first, just recognizing that you might need some extra help, you might need some support. Talking to someone that you trust might be a really good first step. So that could be a friend, that could be a family member, could also be your doctor. You know, if you feel like you have a trusting relationship, maybe talking to your doctor about some options. We have at Geisinger, we have an employee assistance program. There's a lot of companies that offer employee assistance programs. And those are programs that they have resources and they have therapists available. We also, through GHP, through our insurance, you can contact them and they have people that can actually get you hooked up with therapists. Um, as far as Geisinger employees, if you are an employee, we have services right within Geisinger as well. I work for one of them. I work in the Center for Wellbeing, where we do offer some of that support to people who are struggling. So you can find us. We have a SharePoint site, and you can find us and look at resources on there as well. So there's a lot of different ways that if you're looking for help, a lot of different options that are out there and ways to do it.
Yeah, that definitely sounds wonderful and sounds like we have some really good options.
Mm-hmm.
Something I always, like to touch on is if you have any resources that you can suggest, for others to check out, if they still want more information after the webisode. Is there anything, any resources that you would suggest that help with stress and resilience?
Yeah, so there's a lot of resources out there now that you can find online. So apps such as Headspace, there's an app called Calm and another one called Breathe, and they offer stress relief techniques such as like meditation and mindfulness or sleeping tools. If that's kind of not your thing, you can look at websites like Psychology Today. There's one called mindful.org. And also the American Psychological Association. They have a lot of resources and tips about how to manage stress and anxiety and different articles you can read about mental health. Um, if you're looking for therapy services, you can find those online too. There's things like BetterHelp. There's a site called Talkspace and also a site called Therapy Den where you could go on and it's to get mental health support. They have therapists that you can schedule and talk with and so they're really great resources. And also there are some helpful podcasts as well. So if you're a podcast person and you like to listen to podcasts, there are a lot of different podcasts on stress and resiliency and anxiety. And so a few right off the top of my head, there's one called The Anxiety Coaches. There's one called The Mindful Kind, and there's another one called Therapy Chat. So those are just some options, but you can, when you search, you're going to find a whole bunch of things that come up because there's a lot of different resources out there for people who are struggling, which is really great. So people can do these things in an anonymous way too, if they're really kind of feel some shame about reaching out for help, which you shouldn't, but I understand that people do.
Yeah, those all sound wonderful. And I think, in today's world with us all having our phones all the time, apps and things, podcasts that we can do right from our phone are truly really great resources that we have access to. So I love
Yep.
that.
Hmm.
So, as we conclude today's webisode, we've definitely gained some valuable insight into stress and resilience. My last question for the day would be, what are the three things you would like our listeners to take away with them today?
Okay, so number one, stress is a natural part of life. right? We're all going to experience it from one degree or another, but it's manageable. So that's the important piece here. It's manageable, and there's things that you can do to manage it. Number two, resilience is a skill that you can build. So you don't have to be naturally resilient. There are things that you can do to build your resilience. And number three, be asking for help. So asking for help is a strength, not a weakness. These takeaways remind us that managing stress, developing resilience, and seeking help are all interconnected and essential for maintaining our overall health and well-being.
All right. So we got our top 3 takeaways, and we thank you so much, Erica, for sharing your experience and your tips with us today. Thank you all who tuned in to listen to this conversation. I hope that you all found it useful and relatable. If you guys have any questions, you can send them, or feedback, you can send it to myself or Erica at wellness@geisinger.edu. And be sure to join us next month when we talk about weight loss interventions. So we'll see you all. Have a wonderful day.